What's good, beautiful people? I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about the results that I have received from posting on YouTube every single day for at least 60 days. It's been an interesting journey, and the reason why I went down this route is because I wanted to understand and learn what works for me as somebody on this platform. And the best way to do this is to be consistent, is to basically be consistent so you can get the results, analyze those results, and then make decisions, strategic decisions based on that information. So I'm going to read out some notes that I have in order to sort of like facilitate this video. So between the 3rd of February, as in this year, to the 7th of April, it's roughly 64 days, okay? And I was able to generate 174,000 views, which is really good. Now, compared to the previous 64 days, so from the 1st of December 2024 to the 2nd of February 2025, I was able to get 5.4 thousand views, so 5.4k views. Now, that is a 32 times difference in terms of views. And I think obviously if you're posting every single day, you're giving the algorithm the opportunity to basically say, hey, I'm a serious YouTuber, can you push my stuff? And obviously if your stuff is good enough, then it will get viewed, so to speak. Now, a huge chunk of that 174,000 views was one video that did extremely well, which was Escape the Career Trap and Do This Instead, which currently has roughly 91.5 thousand views. And this was like 2 or 3 days into my whole YouTubing journey. So that's an interesting point to come back to. So I'm going to keep on doing this comparison. So when it comes to impressions, for the last previous 60 days, 3 million impressions. And for the 60 days before that, 75.2 thousand impressions. So that's roughly 40 times difference. Okay, so there's a bit of a theme here, 30 times, 40 times, all that kind of stuff there. So I've done 40 times better than what I did in the previous 90 days. In terms of the, what's it called again? Is it the CTR? I want to make sure that I get this correct. So let me just go back to my YouTube stuff. So impressions click-through rate, that's what it's called. So for the impressions click-through rate, so essentially this is every time my video is seen, it was clicked. So a number of people clicked that. So the number of people clicked that divided by the number of impressions is the impressions click-through rate. So it was 4.1% for the last 90 days. And for the 90 days before that, it was 3.9%. So a 2%, or is it 2%? No, 0.2% increase. So that's not too bad. And people don't naturally have a crazy high impression click-through rate. And I don't even want to quote ranges. I just know it's improved. So let me just go based on my data rather than trying to work it out. Average view duration, so it's roughly 6 minutes and 6 seconds for this last 60 days, sorry. And for the previous 60 days before that is 5 minutes and 21 seconds. So there's an increase by 45 seconds, which is really good. I have pretty long videos. So, my videos last anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. So maybe if I do shorter videos, that might help. But again, I'm not really watching for time or anything like that. I'm just shooting the video using my phone. So we'll see what happens there. And in terms of additional subscribers, there's been an additional 4,400 subscribers in the last 60 days. And then the 60 days before that, 86. That's incredible. So that's roughly 51.2 times better than the previous 60 days. Sometimes I don't know what to make of this information. Obviously, there's an improvement. And the question then becomes, what has caused that improvement? Is it frequency? Was there a strategy? What has come into play? And you may have seen my video before where I talk about my first 30 days, where I talk about my approach and everything else. And it's becoming clearer in terms of what that specific strategy looks like. Now, before I get into all of that stuff, I want to note that, I've looked at my top 10 videos, okay? So the highest one being 91.5K and the lowest being 2,000 in terms of the top 10 in the last 60 days. The top one being Escape the Career Trap and Do This Instead, whilst the lowest one in the top 10, so the 10th one, is Why Is It So Difficult to Find a Job? And so when we're coming to themes, it's really centered around how can people basically find opportunities to either make money, build their career, start their own business. This whole concept of the portfolio career that I talk about, where it's about creating your career as opposed to pursuing one. And I think in this sort of like tariff world, should we say, it feels very difficult and heavy to pursue something. But at the same time, it feels difficult to create something as well. So if you've got somebody who's talking about this stuff confidently, or is aiming to do it himself, or has done some stuff that you've done before, or maybe you're aligned, or even you're better, then it may give some encouragement or inspiration, so to speak. And so getting clear about those different themes and what, you know, people are latching onto is really, really important. And I get inspired via so many different means, whether it's conversations that I have with people, that's the main inspiration, if I'm honest with you, or through the news or whatever it may be. Those are the things that trigger sort of like the content that I speak about, and I just note it in my notes. If we look at playlists, I thought this would be an interesting stat. So I've got a playlist called Contracting Advice. There's 90 videos there. I think there are a total views of 112,076. And I've got a few others as well. Money tips, so that's 144,029 views. Career tips, 164,038 views. Life management, 34,858 views. And leadership fundamentals, 327 views. No one cares about leadership. That's interesting. Anyway, maybe that will change down the line. Also, when it comes to device type and stuff, most people are watching my videos on their mobile phone, so that's 63.4%. Then the next tier is computer, which is 17.5%, and then TV, which is interesting, 14.8%, and then tablet, 4.4% as well. So those are the main things that stand out. Now, what was my strategy? What was my strategy in terms of doing all this stuff? I needed to clarify what I was good at, or what people come to me for. I needed to be very clear about that. And I think it was obvious that it was kind of split into three different lanes. People either felt lost and they felt like they needed some support and guidance in life in terms of what they needed to do. So it was nothing specific, but they just felt stuck. The second thing that people came to me for was some sort of career advancement, whether it's knowing more about project or program management, whether it was learning how to negotiate pay, whether it was centered around how do you improve your CV or improve your interview skills. There was definitely something stronger centered around that kind of stuff. And this is over years, by the way. This is not just all of a sudden. I guess the third thing was centered around this whole idea of having I don't know if it's a business or a brand. I mean, people wanted to develop some sort of like system centered around knowing how to be better at generating leads, generating business, putting themselves out there. The initial stages, how do you build an audience? How do you sort of like get awareness, attention, all of that kind of stuff there. This was mainly for, I don't want to say entrepreneurs because I guess I'm still within that space, but I guess people who are in startup phase or beginning or just wanting to start this whole sort of step. So those were the three sort of things. But I knew I had a deep interest in the multifacetedness of careerness. You know, things centered around the portfolio career. How do you create your own career path? Like, what does that look like? Because naturally I'd been involved in a whole bunch of stuff such as coaching, consulting, advisory, etc., etc. But you know, when people say stuff and it's like they either don't get paid for it or they haven't actually lived it. It's one or the other, so to speak. And so for me, it's been a progressive, developing, building, living in these different career parts or career assets of my portfolio pie. And so I knew there was something centered around that, but it's too much. It's too much to talk about. And so I centered on this whole idea of careers, actually centered on what I'm doing currently right now. And of course, previous videos centered around contracting, consulting, all that kind of stuff there kind of gave me a bit of an edge. Now, there were one or two or three people talking about contracting or consulting on YouTube specifically, and those were either, you know, mainly accountants, a few people doing interview stuff here and there, and then the odd video on some people's channels, but not consistently. So I thought, let me double down on that sort of stuff. But I had to make sure that this is exactly what people were talking about. And so I remember going to an event at the beginning of the year. It was the BYP event, and essentially, you know, I was lucky enough for people to start recognizing who I was. I hadn't even started the challenge at all. So people were like, oh, you're the guy who talks about contracting, this, that, blah, blah, blah. I was doing it on LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn had a part to play to a degree, but YouTube was stronger, even though I wasn't focusing it that much. I was only doing one video a week. And so it was clear that there was a need for people to be educated, centered around how to do contracting. That's a big thing. It's a big thing. And so that gave me some clues. I followed up with different people, and I wanted to really identify what the real problem was. And I think the problem that people had was they didn't know how to articulate their value and feel confident enough to transition into something like contracting or consulting. They didn't even know where the opportunities, lied, so to speak. Some of them had people who kind of like gave them advice centered around what they should do, but they needed more like motivation, invigoration, encouragement, all of that kind of stuff there. And so there was definitely a gap. There was something to be solved. The solving being, how do you help people transition into this space? And so if we're going more macro and more broad, careers is the thing. I call it portfolio careers, but career is the space. And then I focused in on this whole idea of contracting, consulting, all of that kind of jazz there. And so validating that with the people, having calls with them and all that kind of jazz gave me an edge in terms of understanding what needed to be done. So essentially, I got some help from my virtual assistant, which I'm very lucky to have. And I basically, I would do a video. Okay, so I'll do a video just basically highlighting all the things I want to talk about. She would prepare that in a template format. And basically, it's just high-level bullet points for each different video. And this is why I have this thing right now. I haven't set this one up like this, but this is what I did initially at the beginning. And so what ended up happening was I would have 7 videos for 7 sort of like notes for the week, okay? And I'll talk about each thing each day. And sometimes it may be that specific things, and sometimes I just may feel like, actually, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that at all. I don't feel like that was the sense. If I got any ideas, I would write it down in my notes, but a lot of my ideas started to lean into how I was feeling and the conversations and discussions I was having with friends. And this is where the topic centered around what I'm calling soft economics or socioeconomics come into play. Talking about the state of the UK, the monetary system, I say politics, but just basically what our country is doing in order to manage all of us, really. And that's garnered some interest. But of course, naturally, I'm thinking, how does that naturally funnel into some of the stuff I'd like to offer down the line? And so it's just been experimenting with different topics. It sounds like people want to know what's happening in the UK and they want a sense of confidence. They want it to be articulated in a way that is simple and clear to understand. People also want to know what real opportunities exist in the market, whether there are any at all, and just having an honest conversation about it. And I think it's that honesty piece, I think there are some of you who are like, they're very much, go-getter in a sense of, regardless of the economic conditions, I'm going to find something. And others feel a bit more despair. And it's much more of the system that is creating these issues. And of course, you're both right. You're both right. And so it's catering to not necessarily both, but for the individual who believes that I can help, whether that is through video solely or, beyond that as well. And that has led to some consultations and, services and all that kind of jazz, which has been nice. I think another thing that has been really important is trying to align myself to the language of the audience. So I can be very sort of like verbose and, I use different, is vernacular a word or syntax? I don't even know. Sometimes I just make up words. But the point being made is to be as simple as possible. Not necessarily I'm speaking because I want to be myself, but when it comes to the thumbnail title and the YouTube title as well, my wife is my secret weapon for that. For her, it's just like, give it to me simply and yeah, I'll understand. And so I'll just check with her. Does this make sense? Do I use ChatGPT for stuff like that for initial ideas? But I would say probably 95 to 98% of the time, I never use the title that ChatGPT generates. If anything, it's almost like negative feedback. And I'm like, don't like that. I prefer to say it like this. One tool that has been good that I recently cancelled is vidIQ. They're great for title generations, just in case you have that. But these are all things that come to mind. I wasn't going hard on hashtags or any of that stuff. It was purely just the video. I used CapCut to cut the beginnings and the ends, and then uploaded everything onto YouTube. Everything was done on my phone. So what am I saying here? Do you have to post a video every single day? No. Frequency definitely helps. I'm not going to lie. Frequency helps. But I think what's more important is understanding how you align to your specific audience. I think that is more important. I have done no additional promotion. I've wanted the algorithm to do the promoting for me, if I'm honest with you, because I can't be bothered. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to set up my brand like that. I want to be able to have something that is catchy enough for people to want to listen to. And some people may be like, this guy just chats rubbish, or I don't really vibe with him. That's perfectly okay. Some of you guys are watching these videos right now. And others are like, I vibe with this guy, I mess with him, and I wanna see what he has to say, regardless of whether it's career related or whatever it may be. I'm more attracted to his mind. And I think I really appreciate those people even more so. Not that I don't appreciate anyone who's watching this video, because it all contributes, so thank you very much. But there's always going to be a special place for those people who are attracted to the way I think, because I probably like the way they think too, you know, whether they're similar to me or not similar to me. There's probably an attractiveness. So if you vibe with me, then comment below and let me know, innit? We can vibe together. But it's building a relatable, friendly community vibe. You know, I need to do better in terms of commenting. It's just the season's been busy, I can't lie, you know. So I will try to go back and comment on some posts. I mean, the 91.5k video has got like 500 plus comments, so I don't know if I could do all of that. I'm not Gary V, do you know what I mean? But in the same vein, I will do my best to. But I've appreciated this journey. I've really enjoyed it. The question is, am I going to continue? I probably will, you know, until I have a reason not to. Just to see where it goes. You know, I'm close to 7k at the moment. I think I'm on 6.8 or something like that, which I'm very thankful for. And I haven't spoken about monetizing or anything like that. I'm still experimenting with that, if I'm honest with you. So if I feel like it, I'll talk about it at some stage. But really and truly, the focus is not the monetization on the YouTube as heavily, even though I have turned on ads. I want to sort of like experiment with all of that stuff, but it's more so to see what I can do from the audience stage, build trust and everything else, you know, see where that goes. Anyway, if you've enjoyed these videos, let me know. If you've got any ideas in terms of topics or things that you'd like to see me offer, then feel free to comment below. I'd be more than happy to take on board your suggestions. But thank you very much for all of your support and all of the ideas and just engaging. Like, I've really appreciated you guys, and I can't complain. You know, I've been on YouTube for a while. You can see the number of videos. A lot of them are hidden, but really started to take it more seriously probably during the pandemic, you know, if we're being real. So I don't know if that was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I can't even keep count. So it's nice to see that things are turning for the better. God willing, there is the right level of progress as well. Anyway, if you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, contracting, consulting, and all of the above, then feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.